Hey, welcome back to my channel. This week's video is a Harry Potter pinata cake that reveals your Hogwarts house when you cut inside. Let's get started. So the first thing you need is a 4-layer standard cake, and I just used 2 box cakes and that was ample. And you want to take 2 layers of that cake and cut holes out of the center, and I used a cookie cutter, but if you don't have one you can use a knife, and then set those aside. And then spread a little bit of buttercream onto a cake board or a large plate, and then add the first layer of cake that doesn't have a hole out of it. And then spread buttercream around the edges and then place on top one of the layers that has the hole missing. And then repeat this again, adding the second layer that has a hole into it. And so this bit here is where you will add the candies, but I'm not going to show you that because I'm going to leave that as a surprise. And you can find out mine at the end if you're remotely interested, which you're probably not. But anyway, so this is where you put in your fillings. And I'm going to show you some examples that I came up with for each house if you want to kind of base yours off that or just do completely different, it's up to you. So for Gryffindor, I took some red M&Ms and some yellow M&Ms and mixed them together in a bowl. And I also added some gold Christmas chocolates. I just got these, I think they were like $1 for a little packet. And one thing though, they are wrapped, so if you serve this, make sure you tell people. And then for Hufflepuff, I used yellow M&Ms again, but I added the brown ones as well. And I know Hufflepuff's colors are actually black and yellow, but I feel like this is close enough. And I also got a strap of black licorice and cut out little heart shapes using a fondant cutter, or plunger I think it's called. And I just made a bunch of these and that's what they look like. And I also added some unwrapped sherbet lemon candies. And then for Slytherin, which I think this was my favorite, I think it turned out really well, I got some crispy mint M&Ms. I don't know if everywhere has this, but they have them in Australia. And these are really good because they come in light green, dark green, and white. And so I put the green ones in a bowl, and then I took out the white ones and sprayed them with edible silver luster spray. And this is probably a tad over the top, like you don't have to do that, but you can if you want. And also just added like some cheap green lolly snakes as well, because obviously the Slytherin mascot is a snake. And lastly for Ravenclaw, I put some blue M&Ms in a bowl, and then I rolled out some tan fondant and used a fondant cutter to cut out little birds which are meant to be the Ravenclaw eagles. And I brushed a little water on them, and then I used a dry brush to brush on some bronze luster dust, and then I just let them dry. Admittedly, these ones don't look super Ravenclaw-y, but I couldn't really find any dark blue candies or bronze candies, they're just not that common. So do your best, maybe you'll come up with something pretty cool. Anyway, that's what they look like. And so then you just want to fill your cake with those and then add the final layer of cake. And then cover the whole thing with a light crumb coat of buttercream frosting. And then place this in the fridge to harden. And while the cake's in the fridge, let's make a fondant Hogwarts logo. So to make this, I went onto Google and I found just like a simple outline image of the Hogwarts logo, and then I put it on Photoshop and separated the outline image into individual segments. And I'll put this template online somewhere and leave a link in the description if you'd like to use it for this or for anything else really. Though if you do change the size, make sure you change all the pieces the same amount so that they fit together properly and to scale. And then you just want to cut out all these sections individually. And you don't have to do this, but I put little crosses on them in the color that I want the fondant to be for each one so that I don't accidentally mix them up when I'm cutting them out. And then to dye your fondant to match the emblem, you'll need a big piece of yellow fondant and then a small piece of grey, tan, red, blue, orange, and green. And then roll out your fondant to about 1/2 centimeter thickness and place the template that goes with that color on top and use a sharp, clean knife or blade to cut out the design. And repeat this for all the shapes. And if you want to add details, do this before you assemble and just use an edible marker or gel food dye and a small clean brush. And just try and copy them as best you can and then just set aside to dry if that's necessary. And now we're ready to assemble the logo. So the only slightly tricky part about this is that if you can see, the little H segment covers part of the snake, but then part of the eagle covers the H. So to make this work, line up the little H segment over the snake and then cut out that little bit of the snake. Then brush a little water on the back of the H and then press down, slotting it in where the missing bit of the snake is. And then repeat this for the eagle, but cut out of the H instead of the eagle. And then add the lion and beaver just normally. And that's the finished emblem. I think it looks super snazzy. Once the frosting on the cake has hardened, take it out of the fridge and it's time to add the next layer. To do this, take the rest of the frosting and split it into 4 separate bowls, and then dye one bowl green, one blue, one red, and one yellow. And use an offset spatula or a knife if you don't have that, and then spread the red frosting generously along the bottom quarter of the cake. And repeat this with the rest of the colors going up the cake, covering each quarter with a different color. And you don't have to do it in the order I did, it can really be any, it doesn't matter. Then take a frosting scraper and drag it around the outside of the cake until it's neat and smooth. And then neaten off the top so it's nice and level, and then pop back in the fridge for this layer to harden. And while that's hardening, let's make a dark chocolate ganache. This is really easy, so I'm just going to leave instructions in the description. And then pour the ganache on the top of the cake and use a spatula to push this towards the edges. And then use a spatula to carefully drag little bits of the ganache over the edges. And to make this look natural, do it kind of randomly, like some long bits, some short bits, and just keep doing it until you're happy with how the cake looks. And then simply place your decoration on top and chuck it back in the fridge just to get that ganache a little bit firmer. And once it's hardened a little bit, just take a sharp knife and then just cut it open, and time for the great reveal. If you can't see the little candies, I am a Hufflepuff. And thank you for watching this video. Please leave a comment below on what your Hogwarts house is, and is there anything you'd like to see me make next? If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed already, please do that. I will see you next week.